BMC has 3 new iterations of its adventure gravel bike, the URS, the Unrestricted, and a whole new electric gravel bike, the URS LT AMP. Over the last couple days here outside of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, I had the chance to ride 2 of these bikes. On Tuesday, I rode and occasionally pushed the top-end URS 01 with 20 mil of travel front and rear, and the new SRAM Red XPLR AXS paired with an Eagle transmission. And yesterday, I rode the e-bike, the URS LT AMP, on a 30-ish mile, 4,000 foot ride up well over 10,000 feet. I had a couple of issues with both bikes, but generally enjoyed riding both of them. So how does a 30-pound electric gravel bike feel at over 10,000 feet when you run out of battery? Well, I went up on top of the mountain and found out. In this video, I'll tell you about what's new with the URS lineup, what continues from the existing bikes, what I like, what I don't like, what went wrong on the test rides, what went right on the test rides. I've been a cycling journalist for over 25 years, and no, I do not take money for bike reviews. If you find this video helpful, please subscribe. That helps this channel out. Now sit back and enjoy the bumpy, sandy, muddy, occasionally pushy rides on 2 of the new BMC URS bikes. I'll give you a quick lay of the land of all 4 new bikes, and then I'll dig into the test rides of 2 of the bikes. Starts with the rigid URS, then there's the URS 01, this guy, which has a redshift stem up front, and then the elastomer, now tunable to 3 different settings in the rear, both 20 mil. The URS 01 LT for long travel, although oddly it's still the same 20 mil as you have with the stem, but that is done with high ride suspension inside the head tube, and then the same 20 mil elastomer rear. And then finally, the new electric bike, the URS LT AMP, which has, you guessed it, the same 20 mil rear, 20 mil front, with that high ride lockout front suspension. All the bikes get some new tweaks. You now have 47 mil of tire clearance. That's up from 42. Why not all the way to 50? I don't know. But BMC would tell you, well, we already have a lot of travel, a lot relative for gravel bikes with 20 mil front and rear. So that, you know, equates to a much larger tire. But be that as it may, tire clearance 47 millimeters front and rear. A couple small tweaks in the Geo. You know, the top tube is shorter by millimeters. The head tube is slacker by, less than a degree. The biggest change, dropping the BB. You're going from a 69 on the outgoing bike to 76 here. In general, I think a low BB is a good thing for gravel. Makes it feel nice and stable. When you're riding in tighter, more technical stuff, you can, and I did, smack your pedals quite a bit as the rocks encroach on you. Despite the small tweaks, geometry stays progressive, right? Super long, relatively top tubes for this medium large, which is, effectively like what would be a 56 centimeter in an old school road bike. You're looking at a 59-ish centimeter top tube. Pair that with a 80 millimeter stem. UDH, everybody's doing it. Well, not giant, but most folks are. You've got the new Red XPLR levers and crank paired to an Eagle transmission at the rear. Down tube storage, another thing everybody's doing. This works pretty well. It's relatively easy to get on and off and yet remain secure. Some of them weeble wobble a bit, like I've got a Haro where the shell is a little wobbly. You've got your bag to put your fixings in. New X bottle cage is new, a side mount cage, which works well for adventure bikes when you're often, running a bag up top. A curious thing for me is this cutesy little rubberized strap, which kind of doesn't prevent you from running tall bottles, but can get in the way. This is a 750 milliliter, so if you had a liter bottle, like that kind of interferes when it's empty, and if you put something there, some guys were running inner tubes there, then that's just kind of in the way, and BMC would probably say, well, that's why we've got these side loaders, but I don't understand what you'd put here that you wouldn't just put in a saddlebag like your flat fixings where they wouldn't get covered with muck, or just run a full-on frame bag, but that's new. It also kind of covers up how you get into the frame to switch between one of 3 different density elastomers. Got a John Deere rolling through. Turns out tractors are noisy. Lastly, BMC added an extra small size, so there are now 5 total sizes in the URS bike range. The first bike I tested was the URS 011, a $12,000 gravel bike. Here ahead of Steamboat Gravel in Steamboat Springs, a small group of journalists and some folks from BMC headed out on the Steamboat Gravel course. Last 2 years of that event, I've placed first and second in the 100-mile edition. So I'm fairly familiar with the roads around here. I'm also fairly familiar with the Redshift stem, which pivots down. It does not move linearly up and down like normal suspension. It just rotates on this bolt. So that, while it definitely takes the edge off bumps, to me it's always felt a little strange in that it changes your wrist angle. As we were leaving town, that was exacerbated by the fact that the bar was slipping a bit in the stem. So at the first stoplight, tighten down the bolts, which are a little fussy to get to because of this, inside this faceplate is a 2-port place where you can put in your computer mount or a light or GoPro mount, and it just makes it really difficult to get to the bolts. But anyhow, tighten those down, resumed riding. First set of hard bumps I hit, like it moved again, so cranked it down some more. Moved again. Took this thing off and removed the insert, thinking maybe that was causing an issue. And by this point, the carbon bar had been scarred enough where it was no longer a perfect surface. So aborted that test ride. Went back to the BMC van where Pro Mechanic Joe, thank you sir, helped me switch out a new stem and new bar so we could resume the testing. That setup, for whatever reason, worked just fine. I don't know if it was an issue initially with the bolts or an slightly out of tolerance stem or bar, but in any event, my first impression where I already had a negative bias about the stem was underscored. These things happen, right? Resumed the riding now solo, and once the bar was now fixed and only moving that 20 mil or so, I was fairly delighted by how smooth when you're in the saddle this bike is. Yes, some of that is 44 mil tires at low pressure. This bike's got the OG Explorer wheels from Zip, the 101 Explorers, which have a bit of ankling to them, so that can take a wee bit of the impact, and then also the 20 mil Outback. 20 mil Outback, I'm totally sold on. This, not 1,000%. But when you're in the saddle, not torquing on the bars, it does an excellent job of removing that annoying vibration you get from washboard or small, frequent bumps. What bugged me initially about this, and still bugs me a bit, is when you're really torquing on it, particularly on a hard surface like pavement or even just like smooth gravel, the thing moves and the angle of your wrist moves. So I know some people love these things. BMC loves these things. I have friends who love them. A positive to the Redshift stem is that you can put it on any bike. Not this particular one. This is made specifically for BMC with their lovely stem. But Redshift has a whole variety of stems, including some new shorties for progressive geo bikes that you can pop on any bike and add a bit of comfort. So to each their own. Not necessarily my favorite, but I will say for steady state riding, of which most of gravel is, it works pretty well. Just when you're out of the saddle torquing on it or climbing, sometimes pulling back on the bars, there's some, to me, weird feeling to it. I definitely feel, and hopefully on the camera you can see the movement. Just pulling on the bars, climbing. I'm exaggerating it a bit, but it's not as pronounced in the drops as on the hoods. The further out you get, the more leverage you have, of course, and the less force it takes to move. Another small irritation while riding was the new rubber strap on the down tube would occasionally just sort of flick at the inside of my calf as I was pedaling. Not consistently, but sometimes when the bike would move a bit on the gravel, I could feel that. Didn't feel that at all on the AMP bike, I believe, because that has got a wider Q factor with the motor down there at the BB, but that was something that I noticed occasionally here. How does the new 47 millimeters of tire clearance work out with 44 tires? I inadvertently found out. That went from rideable and fun to walkable on the side of the road pretty quickly. Oops. It's funny how we obsess about millimeters of clearance, and then you just get out in the mud and you're a person in stretchy pants with a bicycle in the mud. Do we chance it and try to ride it and make it worse? Yes. Yes, we shall. Whoa! Okay. Probably should put both hands on the bars for this next part. Whoa! Oh, and there go my sunglasses. Oh, man. Oh. Oh. It was going so good until it wasn't. It's like a rather fine chocolate mousse. Still life with muddy bicycle. Getting Unbound 2023 flashbacks here. Mother trucker. Come on. All right. All right. Now this is when an intelligent person would just walk. But I shall ride. I shall try to ride, I should say. I've given you some gripes, now some things I love. I love the fit and functionality of the new Red XPLR AXS levers. There's just a lot more purchase for your hands, a lot more space. Braking power is markedly improved, not just in the drops, but very much so on the tops, which is where I often ride when I'm doing gravel. And then having buttons to drive the computer is a cool thing. It works, these buttons can drive Garmin's and Wahoo's, but with the Hammerhead Karoo being part of the SRAM family, you can get a little bit more functionality out of that Karoo with these buttons, with short presses and long presses on both sides and dual presses. You got a whole host of functionality with the buttons when paired to a Karoo. Dig that. The Geo is great for an adventure gravel bike. You know, slackish, just shy of 70 degrees, short stem, long top tube. Feels good and confident whether you're riding on fairly tame champagne gravel here in Steamboat or greasy, mucky peanut butter mud. Back into the bike, love how it feels. There's probably a bit of give in the post, and that, you know, up to 20 mil of elastomer suspension in the back, I think feels fantastic. It's not overly complicated. There's nothing to really break down or require service. It just takes the edge off, and it has a unique look, but I'm not looking that way when I'm riding unless things have gone horribly wrong. So I love how the back end of the bike feels. The B in BMC does not stand for budget. The bicycle manufacturing company does high-end stuff with high-end prices. So the cheapest bike you can get in this lineup is the rigid version with Apex, which will still cost you a cool $3,800. Now the new, the URS LT AMP, a 30-pound electric bicycle. It's got the TQ drive system, which was quite pleasantly quiet. Before we get into this bike, I want to talk about the LT part, which is also available in an analog, an acoustic, a manual bicycle. Still 20 mil of travel, but it's a coil inside the head tube with a lockout up top. And unlike the Redshift, where the bars pivot, this just travels like most bike suspension does. So the angle of the bars don't change. So I prefer that feel considerably to the Redshift feel. And then again, at the rear, you've got the 20 mil of elastomer suspension. You can take it apart here and put in one of 3 different densities to tune it as you like. Let's talk about the E part. E-bikes can be quite fun to ride. I'd love to do a montage of people's faces who have ridden bikes for a long time before they get on an e-bike and they're skeptical, and then after they've been zippity-doo-dotting up the way. How long does the battery last? That's always the question, right? That's the question new riders have, and that's the question old riders have. Like staring down the barrel of our planned ride, which was, you know, climbing 4,000-ish feet. We all wanted to know, how far will this battery go? There's 3 different settings. I mean, you can just have it off, but then there's also, you know, 1, 2, and 3, or dot, circle dot, full blast on the graphic up top. And it would give you a mileage readout, kind of like your car may do for, you know, how much gas you have with estimated remaining mileage. Thing is, this bike doesn't know what type of miles you're looking at, right? Like climbing 4,000 feet over 15 miles is different than descending 4,000 feet over 15 miles. So the answer is, I don't know. The bike doesn't know. You just have to go out there and find out. I got 3 modes here. Come on, derailleur. 3 modes. This is 1. With 2. And with 3. Let's do 3. Why would you not do 3? Come on, derailleur. Battery's pretty darn quiet. You know, the tires on the road are a little bit louder. I'll put it down to the motor, see if you can hear. So that's nice. Not as nice as these views though. Oh, this front end's heavy. I went to pull up over the puddle and nothing happened. A couple things that are super fun about riding e-bikes. One is, yeah, being able to blast up hills, especially with this on its highest setting, a maximum 300 watt additional output. That feels good, that feels fun. And you can pedal as much or as little as you like. The motor only kicks in, like most e-bikes, only when you're pedaling, right? There's no throttle. You have to pedal and then you're given the assist, and you can tune the amount of those 3 different levels as far as the power output and the torquiness thereof. Another thing I appreciated about having motor assist was on some of the techier single track climbs where you need to have a very smooth, steady power output as you're picking your way up over greasy roots and rocks and such. And turns out a motor is pretty good for that. So that was, you know, helpful to get up some trickier bits. This has a 42 ring paired to an Eagle 1052 at the back. This transmission drive is powered by the battery. And before I turned on the bike at the start, the bike went at shift, which made me think, okay, so if and when the battery dies, which it probably will, does that mean I'm left without shifting? Because that would be no bueno. That's not the case. I don't know exactly how much battery life is left, but after the battery dies, which it did on my ride, there's still some amount of battery shifting left. So the test ride we did on this, climbed up, did a big single track loop, and then descended down some forest roads. And turns out you don't really need power when descending, and the additional weight arguably, adds into not only the downhill speed, but a bit of stability. Going back uphill would have been a very different story, and there were a couple kickers on the way back that I was absolutely feeling the bonus, 10 plus pounds on this bike.
Well, look who's still got some battery life left. Zippy McGee.
The key is to get back to the vehicle with 0. Then you know you had maximum fun.
Alvin just discovered how deep that puddle was, so I don't have to. So now we're at 10,500 feet, 21 miles into a 42-mile ride, and I'm officially on 0 battery. Early on the lower pitches, I was going full blast, the highest of the 3 settings, and then for the last, 10 miles or so, I've had it on the lowest setting, 1. And now we'll see how this bike feels like to ride back on good old analog, acoustic, manual drive. Descending on this thing was a hoot. Very much appreciate having 20 mil of travel there and bars that don't change angles. I was following Logan Jones Wilkins, and we were having a blast railing down on the dirt roads. One thing we both commented on afterwards was, how relatively little arm pump there was after descending for 4,000 feet, and how much more stable our vision was. Sometimes on you get to the bottom, or even before you get to the bottom, you have to slow down because you're just getting your brains rattled out of your ears, it feels like. And 20 mil is not a lot, but it was enough so that rattling wasn't the limiting factor for speed. For some of the chunkier bits, I would stand up, but it was also, comfortable to stay seated on some of that descent. And that's certainly a noticeable difference from, firmer bikes. Certainly like an alloy bike with a metal post going to a carbon post and 20 mil of squish makes a difference. After having ridden the new Red XPLR levers with their great braking the day prior, going back to SRAM Force, it's fine, but it's noticeably less powerful, especially when you're on the hoods and braking up here than it is down there. So not like it's dangerous at all, but just there's noticeably less power on these guys versus the the Red XPLR AXS levers. This is always a visual oddity to me, that when you backpedal, the chain doesn't move. So that's the latest 4 new BMC URS Adventure gravel bike models, and a taste test on a couple of them. Let me know what questions you have. I will do my best to answer them in the comments below. Whether you prefer an e-bike or an analog bike, I hope you can get out there and enjoy the ride.
There goes that guy with the battery again. Battery life left.